Valerie and Daniel first crossed paths at his workplace. Back then, Dan was still a student, juggling classes with a part-time gig fixing computers. Valerie came in one day, flustered and on the verge of tears. Her laptop had crashed right in the middle of her term paper, and panic had taken over. Feeling for her, Dan did something unexpected. He lent her his own laptop, no questions asked. That small act of kindness made an impression. Grateful and a little curious, Valerie agreed to go on a date with him. Fast forward 7 years married and living together, their once easy connection had begun to fray. Lately, Valerie seemed more irritable, more critical, picking Daniel apart over the smallest things. What used to be the closeness of married life started to feel more like a burden than a bond. It was disheartening, sure, but both held on to the hope that this was just a rough patch. Something temporary. One evening, after a night out with her friends and a couple of glasses of wine, Valerie came home a little tipsy. She leaned into Dan with a mischievous glint in her eyes and suggested they spice things up in the bedroom. Intrigued, he asked what she had in mind. At first, she danced around the topic, clearly hesitant to lay it all out. But eventually, she came clean. She wanted to try bringing someone else into their bed. Not only that, she confessed to already signing up on a site meant for people with exactly that kind of interest. Daniel's reaction was immediate and intense. The idea revolted him. To him, a third wheel wasn't just awkward, it was a violation of everything sacred between husband and wife. Even if it was agreed upon, it still felt like cheating. He couldn't wrap his head around how someone who loved him could even think of such a thing. His frustration boiled over. He didn't speak to Valerie the entire next day. That evening, she tried to make amends. "I didn't realize it'd hit you so hard," she said softly. "I overreacted. I'm sorry, too," Dan replied, though in his heart, he didn't really feel at fault. His reaction felt justified. Still, a seed had been planted. He couldn't shake the suspicion, the gnawing need to know what she was capable of. Would she actually go through with it? Was she willing to cross that line if given the chance? For weeks, the idea took root, growing into something more. A plan. Dangerous, maybe even cruel, but the need to know overwhelmed the fear of what it might uncover. Eventually, Dan decided to act. Better to do and regret than never know and live with doubt. He told Valerie he was going on a business trip. In truth, no such trip existed. He took a short leave from work and rented a small apartment across town, far enough to stay hidden but close enough to keep watch. Then he reached out to his old friend Peter, someone Valerie had never met. Peter, fresh from a painful breakup involving infidelity, was oddly sympathetic to Dan's cause. He agreed to help, though he was surprised by the request. Dan created a fake profile using Peter's photo and a fabricated backstory. The persona was bold, flirtatious, and openly interested in adventures with married women. Just typing it made Dan's blood boil. Deep down, he was praying it would all go nowhere, that Val would shut it down and prove herself loyal. But things didn't go that way. For a week, Dan, pretending to be this other man, flirted with his own wife through chat. And Valerie? She didn't hold back. She opened up about her fantasies, about feeling neglected, about wanting to seek satisfaction elsewhere. Some nights, Dan couldn't even bear to read the messages. He'd switch off his phone and pace the apartment, trying to erase the words from his mind. Still, he kept pushing, inching closer to the edge. Would she stop? Would decency kick in? Then came the kicker. He suggested they meet up, just to get to know each other better. But Valerie didn't bother with small talk. She went straight to the point and asked when they could act on the reason they'd connected in the first place. They picked a date. Dan and Peter laid out a game plan, ironed out every detail, and waited. Valerie, believing her husband was out of town, had no idea what was coming. Dan, meanwhile, felt a strange sense of purpose, as if this deception, painful as it was, might finally reveal the truth. And if the worst came to pass, he'd be ready not just to catch her in the act, but maybe, just maybe, to make her pay for it. He'd played the scene out in his head dozens of times. He pictured her stepping into the room slowly, blindfolded, unaware of what was coming. Then the dramatic reveal. The mask would come off, and there he'd be, her husband, no longer the man she'd lied to but the judge of her betrayal. He imagined the shock on her face, the trembling of her lips, the moment she'd fall to her knees, stammering apologies, begging for forgiveness. And maybe, just maybe, he'd let her beg a little longer before deciding whether she even deserved a second chance. When the day came, they ran through the plan one more time. Daniel remained behind in the apartment, a storm barely contained in human form, pacing like a caged animal. Peter headed out to meet Valerie. The minutes crawled. Daniel's nerves were raw. Every creak in the floorboards, every car outside, every tick of the clock set his heart pounding. When the message finally came, "We're on our way," his hands trembled. He made one last sweep of the apartment, clearing any sign of his presence, then retreated to the bedroom and stood in silence, the air around him heavy with anticipation. He heard the door open. Her laughter echoed through the hall, light and flirtatious, the kind of laugh she used to save for him. It hit him like a slap. Her voice was soft, melodic, almost teasing a tone she'd once reserved for the intimacy of their marriage bed. Peter called out from the kitchen, asking what drink she wanted for the evening. That was the cue. Daniel's heart pounded so hard it echoed in his ears. Then the door creaked open. There she was. His wife. Wearing the navy blue dress he loved most, the one that traced every curve of her body like it was made for sin. And over her eyes a sleek black mask. Peter's voice came from behind her, casual but purposeful. "Take it off. You're in for a surprise." Valerie, with a playful smile, reached up and removed the mask. And froze. Her smile vanished. Her body stiffened. Her eyes darted to the man sitting on the edge of the bed. Daniel, unmoving, staring at her not with love, not with heartbreak but with contempt. "What is this?" she whispered, barely breathing. "What's going on?" "That's what I was about to ask you," he said coldly, lips curling into a bitter smile. "What exactly were you expecting tonight, Val?" For a moment, there was silence. Just the electric hum of humiliation and rage in the air. Then, to his shock, Valerie didn't fall apart. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She attacked. "This is on you, Dan," she hissed, eyes narrowing. "You pushed me to this. I wouldn't even have considered it if you hadn't rejected me like I was something disgusting." His eyes narrowed. "So that's your justification? I said no to some twisted fantasy, and your solution was to run into the arms of a stranger? I needed something," she snapped. "You shut me out. You made me feel invisible, unwanted, like I was just someone filling space in your routine. You made me feel like I didn't exist." Daniel stood up slowly. The tension between them now crackled like dry kindling waiting for a spark. "And this? This was your solution? Seducing a stranger while your husband was away?" "I didn't seduce anyone. I responded to someone who made me feel seen for the first time in years. Who wanted me. Who listened. It just turned out that someone was you in disguise, didn't it?" For a beat, neither of them spoke. Then Valerie added, almost spitting the words. "You tricked me, spied on me, set me up like some cheap test, and now you're judging me?" Daniel felt like the ground was crumbling beneath him. Everything had spiraled far past what he imagined. There was no clear villain. No dramatic begging. No easy ending. Just two people standing in the wreckage of what once was love. Valerie's cheeks were flushed whether from shame or indignation, even she wasn't entirely sure. Her brow was tight with tension as she fought back tears, unwilling to give her husband the satisfaction of seeing her break. In her mind, she wasn't the only one at fault. She firmly believed Daniel had driven her to it, that his coldness, his detachment, had made her act out. Daniel, however, wasn't interested in her justifications. He didn't argue, didn't yell. He simply paid Peter for the role he had played in the setup, nodded curtly, and that was the end of it. Without drama, without further discussion, he informed Valerie that she was no longer welcome in their apartment. He would pack her belongings and send them to her parents' house. Panicked, Valerie pleaded with him not to disclose the real reason for the split. She knew her parents would be devastated, maybe even disgusted. But Daniel, still burning with betrayal, chose not to shield her. If she had wounded him deeply, then he would return the pain in kind. And he did with full honesty. Just as she had feared, her parents' reaction was severe. Her mother, stricken with disappointment, withdrew into silence and would barely speak to her. Living under the same roof became a quiet torment. Valerie was left with her memories, the years she'd spent with Daniel, the hobbies they'd shared, the quiet routines that once felt like love. And in that silence, she cried more than she ever thought possible. Because the truth was, she still loved him. But Daniel had disappeared. He moved to another city, severed every thread that might have led back to him. Valerie made efforts to find him, reached out through mutual friends, clung to the hope that someone might know, but they either didn't know, or chose not to tell her. It's a bitter thing, when two people can't agree, when one bends, and the other refuses to meet them halfway. Because marriage, in its essence, is compromise. Not fantasy. Not control. Not deception. Valerie's desire had been too bold, too far removed from Daniel's moral compass. And instead of respecting his boundaries, she chose to force the fantasy into reality regardless of the cost. Now, she could live out such fantasies whenever she pleased. There was no one left to object. But there was also no one left to love her the way he once did.